absolutely.
It's my honor today to facilitate this discussion with my peers across the industry. I'm Pam Verhoff, president of Advanced RPO. I've actually worked in the RPO industry for the majority of my career, and I can honestly say that the last 18 months have it's proven to present business challenges unlike anything I've ever experienced previous in my career. So thankful for those that have joined me this afternoon so we can talk through some of what we're experiencing. With that, I'm going to allow others to introduce themselves. Fred, I'll let you start.
Sure. Hi, Pam. Hello, everyone. I'm Fred Goff. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Jobcase.com. Jobcase is a social platform dedicated to empowering workers. A lot of time the press calls us the complement to LinkedIn for the working class. What is less known about us is perhaps to this audience is we're the third largest online destination site in the country for career services, both from activity directly on Jobcase.com and third-party and other owned sites that we power with our technology. So ComScore and others has us ranked third. So we have a unique position in the marketplace where it's like the biggest corner bar you've ever seen with regard to people helping each other navigate the future of work. And we have just a massive data moat that helps us see into the labor marketplace currently. Hope to bring both of those insights to a productive conversation today.
Great, thank you. Chip?
I'm Chip Holmes. I'm a managing director with AMS. We're a very global RPO with a focus on linking delivery with advisory and technology. It's great to be here. I've been in this industry for about 20 years, love the industry, and very happy and honored to be able to share with some of my colleagues in different organizations.
Thank you. Jason?
Hi, Pam. Hi, everybody. My name is Jason Crumwitty. I'm the Senior Vice President of Client Delivery for Broadleaf. Broadleaf is an operating company of Aileron, $600 million staffing firm based out of Buffalo. I, like Pam, have been in the RPO business for most of my career. Prior to Broadleaf, I was with Talent Rise, which is our RPO company. And then prior to that was with Aon Hewitt's our RPO business. Been a part of the RPOA board for the past several years, along with Pam. So looking forward to the discussion today.
Great, thank you all. We're going to start. Fred is going to kick off today's session with a quick overview of some updated labor market data. And I will say throughout this panel discussion, if you have any questions or comments, and please feel free to put those in the chat, and we will keep an eye on that as we go through the session, and we'll address anything that comes through. So with that, Fred, the show's yours.
All right. So hello, everyone. Pam asked me to just kick off 4 or 5 slides to frame the conversation. Let's see if I can succeed at sharing successfully here. Pam, are you seeing that screen okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So let me go to presentation mode here. All right. So a lot of these charts and data, perhaps many of you appreciate and can be speaking to the crew as well as I can. We know that we're in a massive labor market imbalance. This imbalance currently has the number of unemployed workers per job opening just at a record at this point, based on last Friday. That metric that you're looking at here on the left side, number of unemployed workers per job opening, is now below 0.75. That's unprecedented. You can see the changes, and you've been experiencing these changes, haven't you? The thing that I'd also focus on is the chart on the right, which is, this is really, you can't look at it, as I'm sure this audience knows, as the overall statistic. It's really a occupational geographic breakdown is what matters. When you do that, it gets even more challenging, quite frankly, with regard to different industries and the challenge they'll face. Now we start mixing in the old skills gap as well as the labor market imbalance, because a whole chunk of supply is still choosing to really remain out of the current marketplace. And so I think part of this discussion is going to be why and what can we do about it. The first one to me is the obvious. It begins with pay. It begins with pay, and you'll hear that before I'm done with this entry from direct workers too. So this top chart shows what we all know, the amount of job openings, which makes this just an incredible year for everyone in the labor marketplace. What perhaps may be less known is take a look at that bottom chart. So when I hear people in the media say, why aren't people coming back to work? Is it because there's too much unemployment benefits? That's absolutely false, by the way. We know, because we've had a live experiment that's been going for 2.5 months now, which is starting in July, 24 states stopped extraordinary federal benefits, 26 states maintained them. That's a great AP test for a data firm like ours. There is no difference in job seeker behavior based on extraordinary benefits and lack of extraordinary benefits. That's not what's going on. If you look at the bottom right, as of August of 2021, hourly earnings on a real basis after inflation are 1% lower year on year. So while we say that, geez, there's this lack of people coming back to the market, I wonder why that is. We're literally paying them less and wondering why they're not coming back in the middle of this great rethink. So when we did a survey of our broad membership base, 59% that were unemployed were actively looking to come, but guess what the top factor is? You don't have to overthink this. It's pay, then type of work, then schedule, then safety concerns. What's equally interesting, as we look at the stat that I saw print today, that we had record resignations in August compared to any other time in history, is that 58% of currently employed workers are considering changing jobs at least monthly. I find that personally staggering. I don't know about you. I expected a large number, but 60% actively thinking about quitting their current job. And the top reason, pay. So I think it starts with, yes, there's a great rethink going on, not just work-life balance, but work-life integration. And if we're going to entice people, we have to talk about what they get paid. The last thing before we go off this chart is look at the bottom right again, and you can see a bit of a head fake. During 2020, for the workers that people needed, there was a big increase in pay, and then it was pulled back. Well, my father once said, a luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity. That's part of what's happening here too. We saw that people started to walk the walk on stakeholder capitalism, not just shareholder primacy, and then it was pulled away again. So that clearing price of the labor marketplace is higher than what it used to be. We need to get our heads around that collectively as employers. The next thing I'd have you think about is this great rethink. Challenge all assumptions. I'm going to use trucking just as a diagnostic example. I'm sure there's cases that you can make in your own experience in different industries. As many in this audience probably know, trucking in turn is very gender biased. Only about 7.5% of truckers happen to be women. When we look at what's changed in trucking job seeking, we did this in the second quarter, we saw that though it was up year on year, it was down 34% job seeker activity looking for a trucking position from April 2019 to April 2021. Here's what's interesting though. In the Jobcase universe, now remember, we have the third largest destination. We have 120 million members, 2.5 million visits a day, 25 million monthly active uniques. We're very large in the ecosystem. And we've seen almost half of job seeker activity around conversations, around job postings, around exploring brands with regard to trucking to be women. So I think that the takeaway here isn't just that women are rethinking trucking as an occupational source, which is true. It's all assumptions are in the process of being rethought. I'm sure you have examples too. So if it's first we got to pay more. Second, let's rethink challenging assumptions that we've brought into this current marketplace. And the third one, when we think of DEI initiatives, too often I've heard the conversations divorced from the rooms that are worried about supply demand imbalance in the labor marketplace. It's as if you go into one room as executives and they're talking about supply demand imbalance, and you go to another and they say, we really need to do the right thing for systemic racism and how it incorporates economic injustices and how we can right the ship. We can see that that's true. These unemployment rate gap by race, by ethnicity, we need to fix this as a society. It's our obligation to fix this as a society. There's no question it's the right thing to do. Just here to say it's also just good business. We talk in one room that we don't have enough fulfillment in the labor pool, and in the other, we are blocking people from getting access to these jobs. So doing DEI isn't just the right thing to do. It will solve a business need. And in fact, putting those together is going to accelerate both, doing more of what's right and helping the business. We saw in our survey just done a couple months ago, 60% of workers believe diverse employee base gives a competitive advantage. This includes a majority of white men. This isn't just based on people of diversity pointing out problems in our workforce. It's across the spectrum. Diversity works. If you embrace it, you'll be rewarded by an employee base. You'll also be rewarded by a customer base. The majority of people surveyed said they'd favor buying products from companies who embrace diverse, inclusive workforces. So the third thing I'd point out is, yes, it's pay. Yes, challenge assumptions. DEI is critically important for us to get into the normal motions of the business, not just a side project. This is the daily activity. This will help solve the labor force imbalance. It's the right thing to do, and it's good business. So those are kind of the openings. Labor imbalance. Let's start with pay. Let's challenge assumptions. Let's remember that DEI is the right thing to do, but it also, by embracing people into the workforce, will solve the labor imbalance. But before I kick this back to Pam, enough of me talking. Let's listen to workers themselves, because the most important thing we all can do is listen. So let's hear what they have to say.
Pay higher wages. The second we raised our wages, we got way better candidates.
And it should be raising the pay permanently. If you up the pay for like everyone, I think people would be more inclined to do more work.
The only thing they could do right now is offer more money.
I would want to make more money.
Making sure they're compensating their workers well.
Raising wages to account for the inflation.
Maybe it's just higher pay and higher flexibility for workers' needs.
I believe they need to meet some of the workers in the middle and try and look at it as a worker with a family.
Offer competitive pay, sick leave, offer different benefits.
I would highly value healthcare benefits.
Health insurance benefits for everybody. Just, making work a little bit more sustainable.
I wish I had more support.
There's a coldness to American professionalism. That's why people don't go back to work, just because they don't feel like anybody really cares about that.
I definitely want to change the way that when you have less people, that all falls on you. You have to make sure you're there at work on time and still get those duties taken care of.
But right now I'm doing 2 or 3 people's jobs at a time. So definitely hiring more people would be very, very helpful.
When you go into a workplace, you buy into the culture, and I think that needs to be at the forefront. I think championing a healthy work environment would be important to me.
So Pam, we get that back to you, thinking about, yes, it's pay. Yes, we should challenge assumptions. Yes, we should embrace diversity and inclusion, not just as the right thing to do, but as a solution to growing our labor force, which is good for everyone. And when we listen to people, they're saying the same thing. So back to you for this discussion.
Great. Thank you, Fred. I think that certainly validates what all of us are living, honestly, today with our clients. So we're just going to go have a bit of a round robin discussion here around and dig into each of those topics. So Jason, I'll start with you, and can you share what data you share with your clients to help them determine their competitiveness in different markets in which they operate?
Yeah, sure. And I concur with Fred's assessment. I mean, pay is by far the biggest factor, addressing the attractiveness of a position and drawing them in. I think we're seeing the hourly workforce in particular, major issues, major structural issues, even outside of pay, for people to come back to work. And I'll share some insights there. But as far, as an RPO service provider and the clients that we serve, it really starts with the intake meeting, that conversation that you have with the hiring leader about their particular job and understanding what's going on, whether it's an hourly position or salaried. As far as tools that we will leverage, we really bring data to that discussion. Tools that are very effective for us. There's EMSI, EMSI. Which has actually recently been, I think they merged with Burning Glass. So it's MC Burning Glass. highly recommend their data tool. It provides really depth analysis about the current job, the number of job seekers aligned to that job title, the supply and demand analysis for jobs in the particular market. It's broken out by zip code, where workers live, as opposed to where the company is, and the discrepancies. And so that's a really rich tool that we use as a regular practice for our intake sessions. It's also a continuous discussion as well with that hiring leader. So it also brings back really good median compensation. We've used Career Builder, does have a good tool as well. Talent Neuron, salary.com. So a lot of times it's an intersection of different data sets that we'll bring to bear. And oftentimes we'll provide a synopsis for them at a high level in terms of what that job's sitting, where that job's sitting in relation to their salary ranges. So I think those are probably the most effective tool, because I think it's important not only to understand the job, the nuances, the requirements, but then level set that hiring leader. Because if you are below market, it's going to be a tough, hard slog to get that position filled, because most hiring leaders want to hire, somebody who's a passive seeker, not necessarily looking. And if you really want to attract that top talent requires top pay. And the grass is not greener for a 5% increase. The grass is greener now most of the time it's a 20 to 25% increase in today's environment.
And do you find hiring managers or buyers in general respond differently when you're presenting the data from an outside party?
Yeah, I think it's a good way to start the conversation and help to influence, because a lot of times that data, they realize, our salary ranges are below market. And we may need to talk to our HR business partner about where do we have flexibility to move in and around there. So it's good to level set at the beginning. I think also, let's say when you're 30 days in, when you're starting to, I'm taking a professional job, for example, where you're 30 days into that search, you've identified viable candidates, and then sharing what their salary expectations are as you're going through the slate. And then at the end, of course, during the close, what does that total compensation package look like vis-a-vis what they're currently making, and making sure that that candidate is kind of set up during the recruitment process. So when you get to that, let's say, offer stage, that it's not, you've underwhelmed them with an offer that's just not going to meet their needs, because that's a waste of everybody's time.
Yeah. Chip, anything in addition you'd like to add there?
I agree with that completely. What I would say is another thing we like to do is do an analysis of the internal data. So, because sometimes, for example, a company may have issues in one area, but not another. So if you look holistically, they seem to be fine. But maybe it's a software company and their developers are paid well, but their QA is not. So we do just a breakdown of that to ensure. And then even as we look at when positions are being filled, a lot of companies say we want to hit midpoint every time. Well, then let's analyze who's accepting your offers, because maybe when you hit midpoint every time, you're also getting declined every time, and it's only when you go above. So I think once we determine kind of across the board what looks good, in order to help people understand that there can still be issues internally, we like to do a bit of a breakdown, a deeper dive on the client's information, so that we can ensure that there's a holistic plan. Not everyone's as centralized as everyone else, and make sure that we're heading in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things we run into occasionally with our customers, especially in today's market, is this acknowledgement that the market is where it is. However, they have some challenges with internal equity within a lot of the roles that we're recruiting on. So it's a bit more complex than simply going to the market differently. They've got to address the internal equity as well. So
are these enterprise clients you're talking about mostly, or mid-market?
More mid-market for my business. And so it is, but the data is very powerful and helpful. And I think what we have seen is through this ongoing discussion, we've been able to facilitate the decision making, within these organizations to move the needle on salary.
Yeah, I think you're right on just to add on to the internal equity issue. I think that's the biggest hang up, and where we get stalled out during that offer process. Sometimes it can go 2 or 3 weeks because executives are wrangling with that internal equity piece that hasn't yet been addressed. And I know we've addressed it internally proactively for some of our recruiters and client delivery people. We know what the market's bearing, and so we've actually gone to them proactively and said, we don't want to lose you. We love the work that you do, and we want to keep you. And here's actually a raise, which is very difficult to do for clients to do, and then wrangle that internal equity issue. And then when you're doing it at scale, it becomes a lot more complicated.
And yet, Jason, are those same clients complaining about attrition problems in 2021?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Turnover is a major issue. And then they can't, folks are leaving for significant pay increases, especially on the professional side.
Yeah, so this is where I think the opportunity is for this audience, right? Because you have an ability to talk to HR. Pull it together for them. Because if they step back, listen to the dissonance. I don't understand why I can't hire people. If I pay them more, that's out of sync with everybody I have. Why is everybody quitting my shop? Dude, you're behind, right? The whole market has shifted. The clearing price for labor has shifted. By the way, if you're mid-market competing with enterprise, you're really going to be left behind, because 181 CEOs have said it's about stakeholder capitalism, not shareholder. They're slow at executing that, but they're not going to fully miss over the next years. So the tide is rising. Now, on top of that, inflation is up. So running flat is cutting people's pay every day now. I think only managers that have this like great stuff like I do are going to remember what inflation's really like. But let me tell you, you're doing somebody no favors, taking them from 13 to 15 bucks an hour when Happy Meals just went from 8 to 12, right? That's no big favor. So I think all that together is, if we can pull it together and have HR, because they're busy, I get it. If they can pause and say the conversation about attrition is the conversation about internal equity with external wages, take a step back, you're off, have a conversation about where the worker value is versus shareholder value in terms of where that knob is. You got to turn it if you're going to be medium-term viable. Otherwise, we all know what happens. Your best employees are going to quit first, and you're going to end up raising it after the horses have left the stable.
Many clients haven't raised their prices, though. Just the ones that I've, been in touch with. They're absorbing the labor cost increase. I have one that their labor cost increase has gone up because they bumped up their hourly workers by $1. I think there's 300 or 400 of them. So $400,000 over the past, 4 or 5 months. And they go, but we haven't addressed it with our clients yet. So I do think there is some pent up inflation that's going to happen, because businesses have we're going to absorb that cost for now, especially for some of their fixed contracts. But it takes a long time to increase prices with clients. So I think we're going to see some increased inflation going forward. But that's an excellent point, Fred.
Yeah, and that tie to retention is even exacerbated on the hourly side, as it relates to pay and turnover. So, with those high volume hourly roles, it's if they're not competitive in the marketplace, it's ongoing churn. So Chip, we can't all be the top payers, if you will, in our market. So, what else can we be doing to help engage and attract candidates if you aren't necessarily at the top tier?
Yeah, and I think pay is a key, and so I don't want to in any way dilute that. At the same time, there are reasons we may not be at the top. There are some who've artificially inflated. There are some who are paying more than they really can to draw people in at this point. And in the end, those are probably the people who are going to be exited from the organization. So there's reasons for that. There's a startup that may not be able to pay the same amount. So while I think that pay is so important, there are other things that are of value. I can say personally, pay isn't my top driver. I go a place because I want to be there. So I know that there are other drivers as well that function alongside that. I think obviously flexibility is one. The problem is when you have low pay, which some do, and they don't have any flexibility, you've got even bigger issues. So whether it's flexible schedules, certainly on the remote versus on-site, culture matters. We spend a lot of time developing a value prop, but too many of us sometimes spend more time on the value prop than actually living out those values. So it's important that we work internally to ensure that we actually are the place that we aspirationally are, and then we're able to get that out to the market. I think that's extremely important as well. Even in some situations where I know of one company where for them to raise pay as much as they'd like to, they would upend. So they know the need and they want to work towards it, but in the short term they can't. My recommendation is that they have that they be a place where individuals can be trained, they can learn, that you do more people at an early career, or you look to reskill people. So it's a good opportunity, almost for lack of a better term, the enterprise model of where enterprise hires people out of college, including my son, and they train them, they get valuable people who have a lot of potential. They know that for 99% of the time, they're going to keep them for a year or two, but they train them quickly and they get them working for 2 years. I think those are some of the things. I want to be really careful because I think Fred's made a great point. I would not in any way disagree, but not everyone's going to be at the top. So I think those are some of the things we need to do to ensure that we still remain competitive, even if we aren't paying the most money.
Chip, I'd add what we see in the community. You touched on flexibility. We see predictability when you get to certainly hourly workers and non-managerial workers. It's amazing what a lack of predictability a lot of employers allow for somebody, especially while we're still in the throes of the pandemic, Delta or whatever, and childcare is so difficult with schools changing policies and such. So, and then upskilling and reskilling is really huge. People will have tolerance for a lower current income if they have predictability and if they have the ability of getting skills to move forward. Those are two things you can add to the quiver.
And I think we heard that even in your short video, Fred, earlier in the presentation, you know, from the workers themselves. Of course, pay was pretty resonant in the beginning, but, you know, they talked about, I wrote down support, you know, there's a coldness in the professional world and culture. So, you know, that really resonates with me, there's a big piece of the workforce that is, they're looking for a place to feel a part of.
I'm glad you caught that or captured that, Pam. I think you know, people are really, really smart. You don't need a college degree to be smart. Quite frankly, all of us know plenty of people with college degrees that aren't, you know, so they're really smart. They get the future of work is going to take the holding the reins themselves and driving things forward, et cetera. The unfortunate fact about America right now, though, is 20% of people lost their entire savings. 20% of households lost their entire savings during the pandemic. How's that? Well, first off, because you know the stat going into the pandemic that like 40% of households don't have $400 savings for an unexpected expense. We just had a heck of a lot of unexpected expenses. So in the Maslow's hierarchy, that's why pay is so important. It's like you just got to get through and pay the bills. But right after there, yeah, that anxiety about the future, help me figure out what's next, help me upskill, help me have some predictability. And imagine the loyalty you'll have as an employer if you actually provide that in this age of anxiety and uncertainty.
Right. Jason, anything additional you want to add?
I agree. I mean, financial security is critically important, especially for retirees. I mean, 3 million people, 3 million less workers than pre-pandemic. You know, you look at the labor market participation rate is down 1.7. You know, retirees are looking at it and saying the pay's not worth it vis-a-vis safety concerns, the Delta COVID, there's just not the right amount of pay. Attractiveness of the position without pay. I think a couple of things that we focus on, just to add on with what Chip and Fred said, is the experience. I think candidates are not having a good experience, and experience also ties to speed. Can we move through that process quickly and efficiently and get them an offer that's at a decent wage? And so that's really what we focus with our clients. And I'm sure you're experiencing this as well. Ghosting is at an all-time high. And in many ways, I think it's the employers that are at fault because of the years and years and years of, let's say, the black hole. Candidates have responded to job postings. They've invested their time. They don't get any feedback. They don't get any status updates. So when now they have a little bit more power, they can opt out the process and opt out of the process and not give any sort of communications to it. So I think there's we're kind of that's an aspect of ghosting that I think we need to look at ourselves in the mirror as employers, and do the right thing and provide candidates feedback throughout the process.
Yeah. I see a comment that came in through the chat. An individual indicated job sharing was a concept back in 2019. Why aren't employers looking at this for workers? Which, you know, it's a great concept. I can speak to one of our clients who is in clinical research, and I mean, you talk about a screaming competitive marketplace right now. And one that we are actually having discussions around, trying to address this, individuals that have we're all feeling a bit overwhelmed. And so can you address that and give people a great opportunity, through a job share, give people a little more balance while yet, allow them to thrive in their role and so on. So we are working on some concepts that are similar to a job share. Be interested to anybody else seeing that with any of their customers.
I can talk about the member side or the worker side, Pam, which is we see the labor force in America is bifurcating right now. We're splitting into, let's call it retention hiring and swing hiring, right? So there's 51 million people now, 51 million in a country that says they have 160 million plus in the labor force, active labor force, a third of them saying they're in the gig economy, right? And that includes people that overlap. So here's the thing, whether you are on a retention hire basis or in the gig basis, that's composed of both voluntary and involuntarily people in those. I might have to work for you because I need some benefits. I might have to do gig, but also I want it. So when I hear about job sharing, I think that's consistent with the swing side and how many people, there's a lot that really enjoy this kind of labor, that really want that kind of freedom of flexibility and not being married to one company or whatever. We're in the process of shaking that out. I think it's important to think about that when you're looking at your optimization, because just like the conversation we were having a second ago, Jason, if we get the optimization right, if you say, look, we need to solve not for post and pray, not for cost per click, not for cost of application, not even for hire, but retention hiring when it's about retention hiring. Are they in the seat 100 days from now? Let that go up funnel for how we think about the full metrics, or acknowledge that this is a swing hire, the way that maybe Chip is acknowledging, hey, people hire and they know it's going to be gone in a year and et cetera. These are different motions with different optimization metrics. And I would think, Pam, the job sharing has now evolved into more in the gig equation. Don't think about sharing necessarily a retention-oriented job. Think about how you can have a number of people in the gig economy fill that activity that you need.
Yeah, great point.
Well, I think the popularity of the gig economy, Fred, is to your predictability comment, right? It's highly flexible and it's predictable to be, let's say, an Uber Eats driver, because I can go on my own time when childcare may not be available, where if I go to a regular, let's say, hourly job at a manufacturing industrial, I got a set hour of work, which is predictable, but it doesn't work with how my life works or how I'm currently set up, let's say, for childcare, or I'm carrying, I'm a caregiver for my parent, or however that works. And that's where I think the gig is the attractiveness of that vis-a-vis a regular full-time job. That's how people are balancing that.
Yep.
I'm going to shift gears a bit. We've got about, not quite 10 minutes. So the second piece, Fred, that you brought to light is assumptions that we make relative to the workforce. So Chip, I'm going to look to you first to share. Can you talk about when this maybe has surfaced in your world and how you addressed it?
Sure, and actually I'll address something that Fred covered in his initial presentation, and it's that of hiring drivers, which is one of the most difficult skill sets to hire right now. I know of a company that was a bit frustrated because they did some research, and I have to admit this, they found out that women in general make better drivers than men do. That might surprise everyone, but I'm sorry, you win, Pam. But so they make, and they said, why don't we hire more drivers? So we took a look at their advertisements and the persona development they had, and pretty much every advertisement had a middle-aged white man that was leaning against a truck, and that's who they were marketing to. So from their perspective, they wanted more women, but they weren't really advertising towards those women. Now, I found really interesting because Fred's data would suggest that some companies have actually turned that around in a sense, because if 45% of the applicants are women, and we know that in general, by the studies, women tend to apply when they feel like it's something that's targeted towards them, we would assume that more people are moving in that direction. Then we would move to, which I don't know if we'll get to today or not, kind of a diversity question of, so why is it then that there's still 7.5% of the drivers are actually women? So I think it shows that maybe there's been some good work, but still the assumption would be, who's the driver? It's that picture that you see, and that's not really the reality. It's certainly not a necessity, and a direction that if we can get rid of that assumption, and if we can direct our advertising, our outreach, our attraction strategy in that area, we've got a large pool to fill a role that actually right now is a real challenge for companies.
Yeah, Jason, anything additional from your perspective on that topic?
I think we're living in old assumptions right now, and I think a lot of the blame, and I'm taking this in a slightly different direction, but I see it from clients that we serve, and is that there's a lot of blame placed on the recruiter for some of the issues around recruitment. And so I think there needs to be a shift. I'm actually seeing some recruiters leave the profession because there is friction. I think that's a very polite word with what's going on, especially with talent acquisition, because there's a workforce that's, not re-entering the workforce. There's turnover going on. And then there's a huge pent-up business demand. So there's massive surges of employment that recruiters are responsible to fill. And so I think there's some blame that is sometimes finger pointing back from the business. Recruiters can't change pay issues. They can be good advisors and consultants. And so I often coach our business leaders to, hey, take a step back. You're ultimately making the decision. We're going out to the market and letting you know what's going on and the attractiveness of the role, and getting people and getting qualified candidates into the equation. And so I think there's a little bit of combativeness. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but I am very protectionist of our recruiters because they've got an incredibly hard job to do right now. And so I think there's some old workforce assumptions that always blame the recruiter, which I think is I think it's unfair, and I think it truly is a partnership that needs to form with the business to help solve some of these recruiting issues.
Yeah, I agree, and I will say we have shifted as an organization tremendously this year in how we vet potential, as we're vetting our prospects, and really trying to understand that dynamic, and quite frankly, how much ownership are they willing to take in this partnership to recruit the best talent for their organization. And because it is critical. We all, and you made the comment earlier, Jason, about acknowledging the value your recruiters are bringing to the organization, and I think all of us are doing that. And if you're not, then let me know, because I'll potentially recruit them. Because there are absolutely not enough great recruiters right now for all of us to be able to to serve our customers at the level that we would like to. So they are an absolute price commodity, without a doubt.
Yeah, it's interesting. I won't take a lot of time. Recently, there were more openings for recruiters than there were for software engineers, and we know how many software engineers we need. So that's pretty amazing statistic.
Yeah.
You got to pay your recruiters too, by the way.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah,
Do.
we do. And yeah, they're just absolute. They're the central nervous system, right, of everything that we do, and the success of our organizations and our customers. And you know, for those clients that are trying to point a finger and such, we do some pretty quick escalation to ensure that, you know, we go back to this partnership that we agreed to in the beginning, because it's really critical.
Yep. I always say it's okay to walk away if a leader is not being constructive and a good partner, and we have walked away in certain situations. Like, you know, I've got all these recruiters that are calling me that got, you know, candidates coming out of the woodwork, and they're going to fill my jobs instantly. And after we have that conversation, so like then I suggest that you put a pause on our partnership and go sign a contract with those folks.
Yeah.
And it oftentimes can kind of clear the air in terms of
right. And then you call them in 30 days and see how's that going, right?
Yes.
One last, we've got a few minutes, so we'll just touch at a high level on the topic of DE&I. And, you know, I guess I'd be interested in the panel's perspective on, you know, what role does recruiting play in DE&I? Jason, I'll pick on you first.
You know, I think there's a few things. I think there's a lot of work to do in this particular area, and it's top of mind for all executives, and it's important. I think actually when you look at the recruiting industry, I think we could also improve our diversity as well and within the recruiting ranks. But, you know, I think to our clients, a lot of times it's over the shoulder advice around DEI strategy. I mean, they own it, right? They live it, and they're building their strategy and what they want to be in the market. So I think as an RPO provider, we're the executor, right? And we're executing on their strategy, on their message, on their value proposition to bring in the right talent and have an engaged and diverse, inclusive workforce. I think what we can do is share perspective, because we have a lot of clients that we work with that are in a broad continuum of where people are at in the DEI journey. And then, you know, sharing what other clients are doing. You know, here's what, you know, a similar client in a similar industry and where they're at on the journey. So we've generally taken the advice and just partnering with them and, you know, reviewing what their current strategy is, and then offering some insights in that way.
Yeah. Chip?
I would just add, and I'll keep it short because I know we're almost out of time. So I think we can do some kind of a diagnostic analysis of data helps us to know. So where in the funnel is there a holdup? Is that, are we not attracting enough candidates? Are we not passing enough candidates on? Is it a recruiter issue? Are we passing? I remember one company where there was a very representative grouping of candidates from the perspective of passing them on to hiring managers, and then they got hung up there. And I think once we can find out where the hang up is, we can't analyze where it is. We're not assuming that people are racist or sexist, but is there some kind of bias that's crept in? But it's easier to figure out where we may be running into issues. And I think Jason made a great point that we have to look at ourselves as well, and then determine what we need to do in order to fix our problems.
Pam, I think there's a whole separate conversation on how to use technology to give us the metrics and without bias, which is really, really, really difficult. So let's just acknowledge biases even in data, and how do we account for it? That's critically important in a whole conversation we don't have time for. I think what I would like to say when you said, what can we do? The recruiter's job is to connect the dots. Connect the dots between an intention of doing DEI and what that means in practice and what the benefit is to the business. People understand that, will move forward. You have to scrub superfluous college degrees. We have to embrace skills-based hiring. You have to embrace the fact that 100 million people have prior court involvement, 22 million prior felony convictions. Yeah. And while we're celebrating white folks on the cover of Inc. magazine as cannabis entrepreneurs, you know how many millions of people of color are out there barred from jobs because they had the same activity? I mean, come on, let's freshen things up. But what we do is fix your job descriptions, scrub the degree requirements, and help your hiring managers understand that that's going to solve their funnel with a really rich, awesome base of potential employees that when they fix the diversity internally, they'll capture more employees and more consumers. You got to connect the dots, and recruiters are in a great position to do that, because it won't happen unless you start with adjusting the job descriptions, which are precluding people from even talking to you in the first place.
Yeah, great point. Great way to wrap up and summarize that topic, which is it's an absolutely critical topic, and one that we work on every single day. So with that, Lamise, I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you, Fred, Chip, and Jason. It was a pleasure, and as we always joke, we could talk about this for days. So let's take this show on the road.
I think that's the challenge with this event. We have very limited time, a lot to talk about, but we will continue the conversation. I saw DEI was a hot topic for our audience. We will continue this conversation in the next panel. We have about 10 minutes for a quick break. Join us at the lounge to chat with other participants, but come back in about 10 minutes and we'll see you at the next session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Pam.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lamise. Thanks, Pam. Bye, Fred. Bye, Chip.
Great to
Bye,
see
guys.
you.
Thank you.